Hey, hello, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration to help us in the process of getting students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I work at IE Business School Publishing, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. Woohoo! And today, engagers, you won't believe who we have. We have Andrzej Marczewski. Andrzej, are you prepared to engage?
Yeah, I suppose so.
Let's go for it. So Andrzej is a gamification solution designer and consultant at Motivait. He's a recognized expert in gamification and especially on the topic of gamification mechanics and user types. 2015, he published this book, Even Ninja Monkeys Like to Play, and if you've heard any previous episodes of Professor Game, you probably have already listened to somebody recommending that book. In Andrzej's spare time, he also enjoys spending time with his family, playing guitar, and of course, video games. Andrzej, is there anything we missed from that intro or something of your personal life you'd like to mention?
No, I think that covers pretty much my entire life. It's not particularly broad. I don't have time to do much, but that's about it.
Focus is always good as well, so that's fantastic. Andrzej, what does a regular day with you look like?
How far into my day do you want to go? We can start from having to get the kids ready first thing in the morning and trying to manage their use of screen time first thing in the morning. The average work day for me at Motivait is average. There isn't such thing as an average day. I tend to be looking at how gamification is evolving in the marketplace, how we can make better use of it. How we can design better solutions, and also then designing better solutions and kind of working on client pitches, working on material to pump out from the company on loyalty and gamification, preparing for talks and interviews and things. Every day is very, very different, but thankfully for me, and I'm very fortunate that it does always revolve around how to make use of gamification, whether it's internally or externally for clients. So each of my days at work are actually really, really exciting and enjoyable for me now. It's taken a while to get there, but it's pretty good. In fact, it's exactly 1 year today since I started working at Motivait, which is nice.
Wow, fantastic. So today is the 2nd of May, right?
Yes, that's right. My wedding anniversary is tomorrow, so it's a good week. And I'm 40 last week, so
Well, my birthday is next week, so we have.
Oh, fantastic.
It seems like a good run in these weeks. So, Andrzej, and just to make sure, I think I'm pronouncing your name decently. So, if not, please correct me.
You're close enough. It's Andrzej.
Andrzej. Okay, fantastic. We both have Polish background, so I'm trying my best, but of course I don't speak Polish either. So
you got Marczewski right. It's Andrzej's the one that gets everyone. They all kinds of pronunciations.
Yeah, the R and the Z, that kind of pronunciation is not an easy one.
No.
So Andrzej, the next thing that we want to get into, and this we always kind of start strong with these questions, and it's for you to tell us a story of what you would call perhaps your favorite failure. And we say favorite because normally failures do lead us into massive learning or into future success. So what's that story, Andrzej?
Well, you've heard this story, I believe, at an event last year. Was it last year now? There are several failures, but my favorite failure is a failure to understand a client need. And actually, I might not have talked about this at the event because it was going into a meeting prepared for something that the client hadn't asked for. And getting within, the first 2 minutes of the meeting and the client going, well, so far I've hated everything you've said. And kind of sitting there, I was quite new to this particular role. It wasn't at this company. It was a few companies ago. And I was, I think it was my first big client meeting with them. And the sales guy froze up. Everyone on the phone froze up. The room went quiet. And all eyes turned to me. And we had this beautiful pitch. It looked amazing. The art department had done an amazing job on it. We've been working with the guy who we were there to speak to. We've been working with his sort of second in command to get this pitch ready. And they kept saying, yeah, no, he's going to love it. He's going to love it. It's going to be brilliant. And so within seconds, it was just, no, hate everything you've said. And the room just looked at me. It was quiet. And it was this moment of, well, what do you hate? Well, I don't like games. Okay. And, everything you've talked about so far, it looks really like a game. And it was that kind of moment where I thought, this is where we're all going wrong. This is why we're finding it so hard to pitch gamification, because people just don't see it. So there was this moment of stripping it back and saying, okay, so do you like productivity? Well, yeah. Do you play games? No. Do you play sports? Yes. So you play games. Do you have kids? Yes. Do they play games? Yes. Do you play with them? Yes. So you play games. Okay. So you don't hate games? No. And it was trying to strip it back to, so if we were to look at this as a feedback system, a monitoring system, a metrics system, whatever you want to call it, does that fit better with what you want? Well, yeah. And if we were to say, add a theme to that to make it more engaging for the people in your company, would that be interesting? Yeah. Okay, then I'll carry on talking.
I'll just continue with my regular presentation.
Exactly. But it was this sort of moment of understanding that, we'd spoken to the wrong person and pitched it in the wrong way because we hadn't truly understood what the person we were going to speak to wanted. And it was that thing of, this would probably work brilliantly for everyone that he wanted it to work for, but he needed to be convinced. So we needed to pitch to him, not to the people below him, and then work from there. And it was a real sort of business moment of the idealistic part of me going, make the thing that everyone's going to want, turn to, we still have to get it past the starting post, and the starting post is the person who's holding the money. So yeah, real kind of failure and learning moment in a very scary way.
It was a high stakes, as I say.
It was indeed.
Something that I would like to highlight from that story is maybe some people that are in education and are listening to us, they say, well, but that's a client. I'm not into clients. But you do have internal clients. Maybe your principal is the one who could be holding back resources or your time or permission even to use these techniques in class. So maybe you have to think about how to pitch this person the idea that you want to use gamification and you want to increase the engagement of your students using these techniques. So this is something, a story that I find super, super interesting and super useful for anybody listening, because it's something that anybody can benefit from and can profit from, in the sense that you're always going to try to pitch to somebody. You always have to convince somebody. There's always a gatekeeper, no matter what name you give him, whether it's client, whether it's the guy paying, whether it's your boss, whether it's the principal. There's always a gatekeeper. So understanding the needs, the motivations, what they are expecting, and what they like is fundamental. And thanks for that story, Andrzej.
No, you're welcome. It's a balancing act. It's a compromise where you've got to please all of the right people as much as you possibly can, accepting that you're not always going to get everything that you wanted to do. So you always have to be accepted. It's like a relationship, it's a compromise. When your wife tells you to do something, you do it, and that's the compromise. But no, it is. You're never going to get everything you wanted. They're never going to get everything they wanted. There's a point in the middle you have to find, and all the stakeholders need to be involved in that. And if you don't involve all of them, then you're going to end up getting something wrong.
Yeah, this reminds me of, I took some negotiation classes a while ago, and they talked, I know it's a broad generalization, but they mentioned the Russian style negotiation, and it's like, they step into the table and they punch the table and say, this is what I'm getting, and without this I'm not leaving, period. And that kind of thing is very difficult to get through. I mean, if you put yourself in that position, you're probably going to get nothing.
Yeah, more often than not. It's like the other option being you go in there and you pitch something so way out there that when it gets to the really good idea that you have that you really like, they go, oh, that sounds a bit more reasonable, because you've sort of set the expectation so far away from what they can possibly get that the slightly simpler one you really want them to have is much better. My kids do that to me all the time. Can we have this really expensive toy? No. Well, what about this magazine? Oh, yeah, okay, that sounds better.
That makes a lot of sense. Anchoring the negotiation.
Absolutely, yeah.
So Andrzej, now we're going to take a 180 spin and go actually for what you would like to say is the biggest or one of the biggest challenges that you faced and actually solved using, game thinking, gamification, or any of these strategies that you like to talk about.
I think it's easy for me to talk about business stuff because we're using gamification to solve loads of sort of business issues at the moment. Onboarding being one of the big ones we're using it for at the minute with clients, and we're having great success with that. But I think for me personally, and you'll know this from all the stuff you've read that I've done, it's how I use game thinking day to day with things around me, especially my children. And I talk about it an awful lot because they're a great place to experiment with things. And I found we had a challenge, and this is a really nice, simple example. I had a challenge with my daughter. She won't eat vegetables. And
that's so uncommon.
Oh yeah, and we came at it from a parent's perspective. Just eat your damn vegetables, and it didn't work. So I thought last summer, I'm gonna apply my game thinking to this. And she's into superheroes, so we created this little. It's like a reward chart, but slightly different because it was all about defeating the various bad guys from Batman. And if she beat the bad guys, she got a reward. Obviously, there's a reward, but it was all around a narrative, and each vegetable she tried was one hit against a bad guy, and it was a path towards defeating like Bane and Poison Ivy and that sort of stuff. And then if she managed to successfully eat all the vegetables, I think it was 6 times each, then she was able to play for the big reward. And the big reward was like a My Little Pony or something. And it was one of these ones where it wasn't a complete success. We just couldn't get her to eat I think there were 4 different types of vegetables. What we did manage to do was get her to eat carrots enough times to beat, I think it was the Joker, and get a small reward. And at the end of it, she went, do you know what? I actually don't hate carrots. So she now still eats carrots. So using the gamification and the narrative just to get her to eat something enough times to realize that it wasn't as bad as she thought it was, meant that she now carries on eating it without needing reward charts, because we can keep going back and saying, but we know you don't mind these because you ate them to get that. And there were things she just wouldn't eat. Broccoli she wouldn't touch. She had it once, she got her one hit, and that was it. She couldn't cope with it and never tried it again. But so it was this weird little thing where just using very simple mechanics, very simple narrative, very small reward at the end, just to get her to the point where she'd done it enough times to realize that actually I can do this. And it brought into play all of the principles I speak about with onboarding and the user journey through rewarding the smaller actions and then leading to doing those actions on a regular basis without needing rewards. It just used all of that in a really neat little way on a piece of paper. And for me, I thought that was a huge success because it just proved the point that if you can get this right, good things can happen.
Oh, absolutely. And I completely love that example. And when you use those kinds of examples, I love it, because one of the fears that some people get when they go into the gamification world or all of these things is they think of an app. They think of, a massive multiplayer online game that costs millions of euros or dollars or pounds or whatever. And they say, well, but I don't have a team for that. I don't have funding for that. And then you realize that there's actually so many ways in which you can make small steps. You can make small things that have a huge impact. I mean, getting your daughter to eat carrots semi-regularly, at least, as I understand from what you're saying, is a huge advance. I mean, think of the kids that normally have a struggle. Like I went to camp, a summer camp, in which there was this kid who, when he saw on his plate lettuce or carrots or broccoli, he went to throw up. Literally. I mean, and he was, I don't know how old your daughter was when you did that, but this kid was like 11 or 12 years old. I mean, he was not just a very small kid. Wow. I mean, he should be, supposedly at least, eating decently. And he literally threw up every time. So the camp managers just literally gave up and said, no, this kid has a special rules and he won't get his vegetables on because we can't handle the throwing up, maybe even on the table, on the eating table with other kids. So it's something that they had to change. So getting that through, I think, is massive. It's incredible and highlighting many things. I mean, you went into her specific motivations. I mean, you realized that what motivated her is superheroes. So you created a narrative that tapped into her motivations and achieved your objective with relatively simple setup, so to speak. Maybe the design you could have been thinking about it for a long time, but the actual setup, the final product, is something that is so simple and so easy to do by other people.
Yeah, and I think that's, as you say, it's really easy to get your mind set into certain structures. So I remember with Gartner, we're trying to redefine gamification as being a digital intervention, and it's like, well, no, that's one way of doing it, and it's a very successful way, and it's something that the company, Motivait, we use a platform for this, and it's incredibly successful and it's incredibly powerful. But if you're at home or you're a small budget or you've got no budget, you can't invest in that kind of infrastructure until you've proven something works. And if you can get a piece of paper and draw 6 boxes on it and put a picture of Joker at the end of it, I'm not going to invest tens of thousands of pounds into trying to get my daughter to eat carrots. Although that said, some days I do wonder. But well, the other thing with it is that it was another one of those ones where it wasn't a complete success. I didn't get her to do everything, but I got her to do enough. And I think one of the things that gamification is really, really good at is making things not suck as much. So when I look at success with gamification, it's not necessarily about increasing engagement across the board 150 million%, because if you're looking at something like mandatory anti-corruption training, nobody wants to do that. It doesn't matter how good it is. You're not going to get up in the morning and go, do you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to do my anti-corruption and bribery training session. But if you can do something with it that makes it not as bad to do and makes it even enjoyable and fun just to do that 20 minutes of training, then you've achieved something, because the overriding feeling at the back of your mind at the end of it isn't, God, I hated doing that. So sometimes it's not about making it fun and amazing, it's just making it suck that little bit less. And that, I think, is something which a lot of people in gamification forget. They want it to be this exciting, enjoyable, massive experience, and actually doesn't need to be to achieve its goals. Sometimes just that little bit of extra, just lowering that barrier slightly, is as big a win as you need to achieve the goals. And it's always remembering that what your goal was, rather than what you kind of this almost utopian view of how gamification could be. That's great, but does it achieve the goal? If it doesn't, just go back to simple basics.
Yeah, absolutely. But however, getting back to what you mentioned in your previous answer, selling to a client that something is just not going to suck, I'm thinking that might be a bit more difficult.
Yeah, obviously there are certain ways of saying things.
Yeah, definitely. No, but I completely agree that sometimes it is just enough to get you to where you want to be. And that's amazing, because in the alternative, you just don't get there. So even if you get
marginal gains,
yeah, exactly. And maybe there's a second project at some other point that tackles it from a completely different angle that helps you achieve your objectives as well and makes it suck even a little bit less. And then you start maybe even having fun. Perhaps not looking forward to the anti-corruption training, but you might be saying, well, I mean, I can spare some time. Yeah, exactly. I love it. Andrzej, the next question, and I'm sure you'll have a lot to say here, is what is the process that you follow when you use gamification on a project? So the floor is yours.
So I follow a fairly standard procedure when I'm going through these things, and again, it's something I've written about in the past. The very first thing is questioning what it is somebody wants and why they want it and why they feel it's necessary. And I think that's the most important step of the entire thing. Before you get anywhere near a design, anywhere near any kind of solution, it's, what is the problem? Why is it a problem? Why do you want to do it? Why do you want gamification? No, but why do you want it? No, why do you want it? What is the problem? Why? Just that constantly going over the same questions over and over again until you hit the answer. Because the first answer is never the right answer, I found. So, again, story you've probably heard of. We want to gamify screening CVs. But why? Well, because we're not getting the right CVs into the right roles. But why? And by the time you get to the end of the series of whys, you find out that it's because there's one sentence missing on the website that explains what the role was. So the wrong CVs are being sent into the wrong people. So rather than needing to gamify the whole thing, you just need to add a bit of text on the screen. So that's the first part. That's the first process. After that, it's then starting to understand, once you know what the problem is, it's starting to understand who's involved in that problem, who the stakeholders are. Again, going back to who's holding the purse strings and who's actually going to be doing the whatever it might be, if it's gamified training or whatever. And then it's talking to those people. It's finding out exactly what makes them tick, finding out, because it's gamification, what games do they like, what do they play, why do they play them, finding out what they feel is good and bad about the current situation and how they would improve it, and what they would keep the same, and starting to understand them, understanding the user's sense of humor and what they like and what they don't like. So, some projects I've been on where you come up with an idea and you start talking to people and realize that their sense of humor is so different to what you expected that you have to change quite a lot of how you approach the narrative, for instance, because they have their own language almost in their environment. So you start to understand who's going to be using the solution. Then you can start looking at what the solution might look like. So I'm not a big fan of off-the-shelf solutions. I don't like the idea of I've got a problem. Okay, well, you can have the green car or the blue car version of the racing game that we sell you off the shelf, and that's the solution. So, but how does that solve my problem? Oh, it will. No, but how? How's that going to solve? So, I like to look at all of that and then go, right, I can now start looking at what this might look like as a solution and what the theme might be, what the game mechanics might be specifically to your particular needs. So, do I need a leaderboard? If there's no competition and no one's competitive, no, I don't need a leaderboard. Do I need collaboration? Do I need points? Do I need themes? Does it need to be pirates or zombies or race cars or whatever it might be? And then go through the prototyping phase where we start to look at, this might solve this bit of your problem. This might solve this bit of the problem. Put them together. What have you got? There's a bit of a game here. There's a bit of there's a narrative across this. There's a bit of learning material here. There's some standardized materials, some videos. Start bringing it together and then working with the client to say, does this work for you? Start looking at the users and see what they want again, and do they enjoy it? Is there something here that they're learning from? Are there bits here that really don't resonate with them? And then going through that iterative process of working with them to get to something that looks like a real product. Then going off and building the real product with all of the various bits of content, and then going back to them again and saying, right, well, here it is. Have a playthrough. What do you want? And so it's this sort of constant iteration of not minimum viable products. I don't tend to go that route because I think in gamification that doesn't really solve the problem. The problem is solved by the actual solution. If you start giving people that kind of bare bones solution, it's not going to solve anything because the full solution is what solves the problem. The bare bones is what gives them an idea of what might solve the problem. So, but it's user testing, it's focus groups with users to make sure that all the bits that you've put together actually hit the notes they want to, but also that the outcomes are correct. So so it's trying to think what process that looks like now, because it's gone round and round. So start off with understanding the problem, understanding the people, working out what kind of you want people to do and feel and what the objectives are, working out how those goals fit with the various themes you've come up with and what mechanics fit, and whether it's games or serious games or gamification that actually solve the problem, because it might not be one or the other. It might be a blend of all of it. And then just constantly iterating with the client until you've hit every note you need to hit with the solution, that all the objectives are met, and that whatever it is, learning transfer or engagement or behavioral change, have all been hit. There's a lot of research, huge amount of research that needs to go on, and a lot of just going back to the client and saying, how does that feel? Does that work? Do the users actually get what they want out of this? So the actual game bit of it is probably almost the shortest bit of it, because by the time you've done all the upfront, all the research, you kind of know what they're going to have. And then it's just a matter of building that, and that's almost the easy bit. The gamification bit's almost the easy bit. That doesn't take as long as understanding everything up front.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I just have a short follow up, because you were saying that you don't go into the MVPs and that kind of thing, but I'm guessing that it depends on how you see the MVP. Because the other day, I think it was with Carl Cap, that we were talking about card games, and he said, well, you have two options. You can try to come up with some card games that you print out and you have the whole theme, and then you realize that the mechanics you were doing were not working, or whatever it is that you were doing was not working with your audience. Or you can go for an index card, just draw something very, very bare bone, very simple, and play the game with that. So in that sense, I think it kind of fits into both, because it's very simple. It's a very simplified environment, in the sense that you're not going through the whole production process and then realizing that it's not what you wanted. But it's not the bare bone, in the sense that it doesn't have all the so to speak features. Maybe not visual features, but it probably does have most of the features that you're thinking that might be working. Is that right?
Kind of, yeah. So that would be for me prototyping, because minimum viable product is kind of the smallest thing that you can give the client to start working from, whereas prototyping isn't a product. It's just these are the concepts, and this is how. So that's all part of the research and the development phase for me, or for us. So for me, a minimum viable. So for instance, if somebody wants a car, the minimum viable product is a go-kart, because it does all the same things a car does, just without the bells and whistles. Whereas the prototype might have been a cardboard box with two drawn on wheels, and go, right, this is what a car is going to look like, and this is kind of what it's going to feel like, but it doesn't yet do everything that it doesn't quite do it. But how do you like that? And then the next prototype might have pram wheels on it. So I think it's quite an odd one how people think about it. I saw some great ones about minimum viable product of a car as a bicycle, because it achieves the same goal, but it doesn't have all of the bits yet. So I think I tend to, if I'm going to do index cards and that sort of thing, that's all part of my research phase and the prototyping phase, not actually here is enough to get you going and we'll work on it from there and we'll keep building from it. With gamification, I'd rather give somebody a finished product and that be it, rather than, and then sort of work on upgrading it with newer needs, rather than starting from this should do enough to get you going and we'll just keep building on it from there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Fantastic. So Andrzej, that was our story narrative sort of section of the interview, and now we're going to move perhaps into a bit more rapid fire questions. And the first thing that I would like to ask you is if there's something that maybe you would call a best practice, or something that you think that mostly any gamification project could benefit from doing.
Better user research. I think every gamification project can do with better upfront research.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. It's funny because the other day I was talking to a market research professor, and he said, there's like this tendency in the market to maybe quit on market research. And I said, well, that could be dramatic. I mean, if we stop understanding the people we're creating, whatever it is we're creating, independently if it's gamification or products, that could be dramatic. So
well, this is where off the shelf comes into it, because how much user research can you do for an off the shelf product that only has one or two different solutions built into it?
That's and this is maybe a deeper question to get into, but I when you were mentioning that, for some reason I started, because as you have seen many off-the-shelf solutions that try to be brought up to different stakeholders in different places, and one thing I thought was, well, maybe at some point there will be so many off-the-shelf solutions that maybe you think when you think of your design, you say, well, there's an off-the-shelf solution that does exactly that. Maybe it's not the one that I have, but I can just go to that one, pick it up and give it and say, well, this works. Do you think that's something that could happen in the near or not so near future?
Yeah, I think it can, because so I'm a bit harsh on off the shelf. There are certain ones that will solve specific problems. So learning management systems, there are some great sort of gamified versions out there, and I wouldn't go and build a new one from scratch if there was one out there that did the job properly. I think with gamification, though, I think it depends on what you're trying to do. Because they're very specific problems people are coming to you with, and they're very tailored to particular companies and environments and cultures. Sometimes it's very easy to say, well, if you just copy and paste this bit of JavaScript onto your website, you've got a solution. And I think that's the bit that can't work. I think, they're always going to be like with everything, if I need a hammer, I go into a hardware shop and there are 20 different hammers. All of them will solve my problem. It just depends how I want to solve it. So definitely there is a space for it. But when you start looking at sort of how people behave and people in general, you have to be a little bit more careful and a bit more kind of tailored sometimes.
Yeah.
But it depends on your budget as well. If all you can afford, if I want to get a screw into a piece of wood and all I've got is a hammer, that's all I can use.
Period.
Yeah, exactly. I don't have a choice. So if my budget is a hammer and doesn't stretch to screwdriver, then I'm going to use a hammer, and it will still achieve the same goals, just maybe not as refined.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Andrzej, what's your favorite game? That's a tough one for sure.
That is a tough one. I used to review games, so I've played thousands of games. The game that I keep going back to, probably at the moment, I'm quite enjoying Minecraft because I play with the kids a lot. That or Mario Kart.
Yeah, those are
the original one,
games.
the SNES one.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a crew when I was living back in Latin America in Venezuela that they used to play Super Smash Brothers from Nintendo 64.
Oh yeah.
It was like literally every Friday I could go to somebody's house and just play, and that was not so far away.
I'm now playing it with the kids because we've got one of the SNES minis, so the kids play the original Mario Kart with me now, which is great. It was one of those things which is a perfect. Almost a perfect sort of example of how to balance game mechanics and the whole elastic band mechanic of if you're too far behind, the cars will actually in front of you start to slow down a bit, but you don't notice it. Just it helps you get closer, and you always feel like you could have won. There's never a moment where you think this is impossible, which I think is a perfectly balanced system.
Yeah, that's true. Andrzej, is there somebody that you would like to listen to interviewed in this podcast in Professor Game?
Yeah, I was thinking about this the other day. Do you know, I would love to. I would love to hear somebody like Dan Pink, which is very big one, or Near AL. I think those two would have some fascinating things to say, but I know they're really hard to talk to.
Yeah, they're on the list of because Daniel Pink. I think there's at least somebody else who mentioned him, and Near AL is a recurring answer as well.
I'll tell you two others. Raf
Sure.
Costa.
Oof, fantastic.
Yeah, I love Raf.
A Theory of Fun.
Theory of Fun. Raf Costa. Richard Bartle. He's always interesting to interview.
True. I hadn't thought of him. Funny enough.
And Ian Bogost.
Yeah, is he still like anti-gamification posture, or has he been shifting a bit?
No, he's not shifted at all. He's anti everything. I remember I once spoke to him and said, okay, so you think gamification is bad and that game designers do it better. So my question to you is, why don't you help game designers? Why don't game designers get involved and help with gamification and make it better? And he referred to it as something like benign terrorism. My comment to him, because if he said no, then he was evil and not wanting to help, and if he said yes, he had to go against his principles.
That was a very well structured question then.
Oh yes.
Andrzej, besides Even Ninja Monkeys Like to Play, what book would you recommend to join our bookshelves?
I think you've already mentioned one of them. Theory of Fun is one of my favorite books ever, just in general. I just love that book. I think that everyone should have, if they can get hold of it and can afford it, because it's not cheap, everyone should get The Art of Game Design from Jesse Schell, another person you should interview. Yeah, those are my two biggies. Those are my two favorite go-tos when I'm stuck. It was with Art of Game Design, you get the book of lens. You can get the deck of lenses cards as well. And if I'm really struggling some days, I just pull that deck out and look at them and go back to the book and reference stuff.
It's kind of a trend within gamification designers to have a deck of cards, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Having had one for many years now, which I need to update. I think for me, my deck's the inspiration deck, because I find, for me, it's very often just I can't think of something, so I just pull out a deck of cards and play with them and kind of look at the ideas and the pictures and go, yeah, that's. For me, it's just a way of getting past certain kind of ruts when I can't think of stuff.
Yeah, that's super useful. And Andrzej, what do you think is your superpower in gamification design?
Being awesome.
That sounds like like Batman in the Lego movie that has 9 apps instead of the regular people that have 8.
Yeah, no, it's like what was it? My favorite one of that was Spinal Tap. My amp goes up to 11 because 11 is louder. But what if you just make 10 louder? No, this goes to 11. I think for me, it's a willingness to learn and to accept I'm wrong. That sounds a really odd superpower, but one of the things that I find you get is a level of arrogance around new concepts where everyone's right. And I think my thing is, well, I might well be wrong. I expect to be proven wrong. I won't just accept I'm wrong. But if you can tell me I'm wrong, then I'll accept that and learn from it. I think that's probably why people listen to me a little bit is because I try not to come across as being overly sure of myself. But also the other thing is breaking down complex things into simple things, because I don't understand complex problems. I have to break them down into simple things. So when I speak, it's always about very simple things, which may or may not build up to complicated things. So yeah, it's willing to accept I'm wrong and being very simple.
the simple bringing down to simple things sounds like maybe you might be an engineer. Maybe.
Well, my background originally was science, so my degree is in biomedical science.
Biomedical science. Wow, wouldn't have expected that one.
No, I hate it. I've got no technology background at all, other than the fact that I've been programming since I was 5, because my dad taught me. He was a chemist, so I mean he worked for years in science. So my background is all around breaking down problems and logical thinking, and that is how I approach everything. It's just pure, A plus, well, 1 plus 1 has to equal 2 unless you prove me wrong, and then I'll accept it. So I have to. It's very logical, and that's how I break everything down. So yeah, science is my background and programming and stuff.
Fantastic. I didn't know that one of biomedical science. Did you ever do something around that biomedical science, or did you start straight on into technology?
I went straight into technology. So I got my degree and realized I hated everything to do with it. I just didn't enjoy it at all. Because for various reasons, but I came out and a friend of mine was a web designer. And I was looking for work, and he said, "Do you reckon you can just give me a hand with a project I'm working on?" Oh, yeah, no problem at all. Came to his office, and then his boss was away for about 3 weeks. And when his boss came back, I'm in the office, and he had no idea I was there, and I solved most of the problem the client was having. And my friend just goes, "Oh, this is Andrzej. We're employing him." and Keith, my boss at the time, was like, "Oh, okay. Why?" And I sat down with him, and he, about 15 minutes later, I had a real job there. So, so yeah, it was pure serendipity. But that was how it came about. I'd never had any real official technology background. I'd never had any training in technology particularly. But yeah, became a web designer and did that for 15 years.
Wow.
From a chance conversation at the end of my degree.
Yeah, absolutely. I have kind of in a certain way like an opposite to that, because I'm a computer engineer, but I decided I didn't want to program for the rest of my life, so I didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I did work with systems, etc., but I just decided I didn't want to sit down and program myself, and I never did. I mean, I've jumped in and out of helping some people doing some very small projects, but I would never dare call myself an expert in programming in any capacity at all.
No, same. I did it for a long time, and I definitely am not an expert in it.
So, Andrzej, now we're going to go for this random question. It's not going to come out, out of nowhere, because I did check them out before getting into the interviews, and I do, even some that make sense and that might not make sense to certain guests. I filter them out beforehand. So here I'm going to click here, and this actually it almost sounds like cheating, no? Because this is probably something that you've spoken about before. And the question is gamification the best solution always?
No.
That comes from the audience. So I would also expand it a little bit and say, when do you think it's not, like, out of the top of your mind, when do you think it's not the best solution to use gamification?
Okay, so the first answer is no, it's not the best solution. When is it not the best solution? Well, the example I gave earlier of when the problem just doesn't need it. So if the problem if you want gamification, but the problem is that somebody doesn't understand the text on a page, then just add text to the page. Don't gamify the whole page because you don't want to add the text, and you want gamification. I think gamification is always the wrong solution when the only reason you want it is because you want gamification, because it sounds cool. I think that's sort of a really big, important thing that all trends, we want VR. Why? Because we want it. But why do you want VR? Because it's great and everyone loves VR. Yeah, but what problems are it going to solve? So I asked years and years ago, I asked Gabe Zickerman, when wouldn't you use gamification? And he went, I probably wouldn't gamify a funeral. Yeah, good choice. He says, but I might gamify the HR department in the funeral home.
That makes sense.
I think it's one of those things where, when's it not the best solution? When it's not the best solution, it's almost chicken and egg, because it's that it probably could solve most problems if done properly, but is it always necessary? Do I need to gamify crossing the road? No, I probably just need to educate people better in how you cross the road, but I could gamify that education.
Yeah, exactly. What I gather from your answer and from your ideas is that what you're saying, like the beyond the surface, is what you're saying is maybe sometimes gamification is too much. Like it's like trying to kill a fly with a shotgun. So sometimes it might be too much of an effort to solve it using gamification if there's something simpler that you can do. Is that right?
Yeah, and I mean, and more effective, because sometimes the gamification may actually just confuse the situation entirely.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you very much, Andrzej. I don't know if there's anything else you would like to add. I would like to ask you to give some final piece of advice. And I always ask the guests to gear it especially for people who have never used gamification, who are maybe on the fences, taking a look, maybe reading, listening to this podcast and saying, that might be something I want to do. I'm not sure if I can. I'm not sure if I should. So anything else you'd like to add, and some final piece of advice for the audience?
Yeah, so the piece of advice I give to everyone, whether they're in gamification or not, is to read everything. There is so much information out there. So read game design books, read psychology books, read gamification books, read gamification blog posts, listen to podcasts like this. Understand everything you can from the people who are actually doing it, and understand everything you can from people who are researching on it, because it's a new topic. It's so new that there's not much information out there about what does and doesn't work, and how and why it doesn't work or does work. So yeah, just read, absorb information, ask questions. The community is quite active. So if you've got questions, ask people, because eventually you'll get an answer. My biggest thing is, don't just think because you played a game, you can do gamification. I think that's really important. Just in the same way, just because I drove a car doesn't mean I can make a car.
Exactly. That makes a lot of sense. So Andrzej, finally, we would like to know if there's any way that especially the audience can connect with you. Maybe it's social media or your blog or whatever you want. If you want to mention, of course, any of the web pages you're involved in, and then we'll say it's game over.
Excellent. Well, so quickest way to get hold of me on Twitter is @DaveRage. Website, my personal blog is gamified.uk. If it's business related, then you're going to be looking at motivait.net, which is spelled motivait.net, because that's the company I consult with and I work for, and they're the ones who I will be doing any work for other people through. But if it's just for general chat, yeah, Dave Rage is a good place to get me on Twitter. I frequent Twitter far too much. I'm always asking silly questions on Twitter and seeing what people do.
Yeah, and I've seen how you spark very interesting discussions, especially in Facebook and Twitter, that people start going around, and some people get angry about the answers. It's especially fun, I have to say.
The manipulation one today. Oh, yesterday. That's causing it. Sebastian de Turding just responded to that.
Yeah, I just read it as well. It was pretty funny. Yeah. So thank you very much, Andrzej, or Dave, whichever makes a lot more sense.
I'll answer to most things that are polite.
Thank you very much for this interview. It was something that we were looking forward a lot, and many of the engagers and past guests have asked for your interview. So I will let all of them know that you will be very soon available. This episode will be available, and it's time to say, it's game over.
Thank you very much.
Until next week. Hey, Engagers. Thank you for listening to Professor Game Podcast. If you enjoyed this interview with Andrzej Marczewski, then you should probably go to professorgame.com/subscribe and get started into our email list. That way, we'll be able to be in contact and you will be the first to know of any opportunities that Professor Game might have for you. And before you click continue and go on to your next mission, would you like to know how the concept of flow and a simulation were used in a high-stakes scenario in an actual company, in a training? Well, then you have to listen to the next episode with Michael Sutton. See you there!